Hi, welcome to On the Waterfront. My name is Mariah Riggs, and I'm filling in for Melinda Moulton tonight. Tonight we have Janet Savage, who is a master hand analysis here with me. And she's going to tell us a little bit more about what she does, the science behind her craft, and explain to you what hand analysis is, which I'm actually very excited to hear about because I don't know either. So Janet, hi, how are you doing?
Hi, Mariah.
So what is master hand analysis?
Well, as a master hand analyst, I would say I'm a life purpose / scientific hand analyst, meaning I use your hands, every aspect of your hands, your lines, your shape of your palms, your fingers, the quality of how you hold your thumb as a personality diagnostic tool, and I use your fingerprints as another almost transpersonal information in the fingerprints, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in a minute. But as a master hand analyst, I work with people who are committed to change and ready to do what it takes.
Oh, that's very. So you used to have another occupation. You have been doing this your whole life.
Yeah.
What was it, and why did you make the leap from your former profession to hand analysis?
Well, let's see. I was in government work and academia and public health for almost 30 years, and I have no regrets. I had fabulous jobs, but you know, at a certain point after 30 years, I said, I'm not sure I ever really fit here. You know, I want to find something that really brings me even more meaning and more passion. I want to make more of a contribution. So a friend of mine, this was out in California, I was working at UC Berkeley, running the Center for Public Health Practice, and she said, well, you should get your hands analyzed, Janet. Well, you're going to hear that there are personality archetypes. We work with archetypes in a hand, and I happen to have the hand shape of a scientist, so I was naturally a little bit skeptical. But, you know, I trusted her, and I said, hey, why not? Why not just try it? I have nothing to lose. And so I went up to our International Institute of Hand Analysis. I had a session with someone. It's the main headquarters is in San Rafael, California. Okay. But we are all master teachers around the world, including Europe. So there are 5 of us. So I had the experience, and it was very powerful. It affirmed a lot of things. It gave me some permission to open some doorways that had been closed. And I just said, well, why not study this? Why not just jump right in and start to read people's hands and just do it? And I said I didn't know that I was going to become a hand analyst, but months into it, years into it, after I quit my job, I said, I'm just going to quit. That's it. I decided, you know what? This matches who I am. Data, concrete, specific in the hands. And then I got to develop my specific, particular intuitive skills. So I just said, hey, why not? So I jumped off the cliff.
So how long have you actually been practicing?
Oh, 17 and a half years, almost 18 years, yeah.
That's
full time.
Okay, well, that's a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, I age myself.
Now
Wait,
is,
30 years now.
No, but that makes you, I mean, that's how you become. So there's 5 master teachers around the world.
Yeah.
And so there's obviously 2 in America.
No, there's only 2 in Europe and 3 in the U.S. Yeah.
Wow, so you're one of them.
Yeah.
Well, we're very fortunate to have you in Vermont.
I'm very proud of it. It took a lot of work to get there.
Now, all right, so it sounds like you came upon this, and it was already an established science. Yeah. So what is the origins of hand analysis?
Well, as I mentioned, the International Institute of Hand Analysis, Richard Unger was the founder, and back in the late 70s, he kind of became interested in ancient palmistry, and there are thousands of years of tradition of ancient palmistry. Some of them are predictive, some of them non-predictive. He didn't want to go for the predictive type, but he studied and studied and studied, and he said, this is great. You know, palmistry is really interesting, and I think it's valid. And he's a brilliant guy. He took the best of the best, what he thought of the ancient palmistry traditions. He said, but what about the fingerprints?
Oh, yeah.
You know, what do we know about the fingerprints? They're unique to us.
To everyone.
Yeah, and they never change. They're indelibly imprinted 5 months before you're born. And he said, well, you know, some of the Western palmists had tried to look at fingerprints and come up with a theory, but he said, I'm going to go to the forensic libraries, I'm going to go to the medical libraries, and he came up with a theory about what fingerprints might mean, because they're a kind of imprint for us.
And did he apply the theory again to sort of the old palmistry that he was looking at when he was developing it?
Well, they're different because fingerprints are separate from everything else in the palms. So it really is, what this is the marriage of the ancient art of palmistry, or feeling the best traditions, and the science of contemporary fingerprint analysis.
And then just kind of going back a little bit, is palmistry something that is cross-cultural? I mean, is it something that comes from several different parts of the world in ancient cultures, or is it specific to a particular region?
No, absolutely. I think it came from Asian region, and then it began to spread out into different parts, India, different parts of Asia, and then headed to Europe, and U.S. was a very late adopters.
Yes, no, that makes sense.
Right.
The Western world has been slow to adopt most forms of Eastern medicine.
Well, when I lived in California, I was privileged to read for lots of different cultures, and you know, most of them said, "Oh, my parents used to take me." My parent, you know, I mean, very common, very well known, and even in Europe, it's much more accepted. So
now, I know just from my experience, I know that there is two other forms in Eastern medicine. There's the cranial. There's cranial analysis, and there's also foot analysis.
Yes. Yep.
And now, are they similar in their discipline, or are they different?
You know, I can't answer that. I think I would go back to hands, and that people say, well, why hands? Why don't you do feet, or why don't you do something else? And I wish I'd brought my little picture, because there's a creature called the homunculus. Some of you practitioners out there will know what it is.
A homunculus?
Homunculus,
It sounds like a Dr. Seuss creature.
And it actually is. It's a creature that is proportionally shaped based on the amount of information that comes from the brain down into the body, neural pathways, you know, communication back and forth. And not a trick question, Mariah, what do you think is the biggest part of relatively the biggest part of the body then, in terms of information from the brain and back?
The spinal column would be.
It's not a trick question. The hands.
Okay, well, I should have known that, right? That should be my default answer for the rest of the interview.
Right. Well, and of course the mouth is pretty darn big. The mouth is actually really big, because we're translating. You know, we don't translate much with our feet, right? We don't translate much with our cranial, with our head. So I said, you know, there's a lot of information there. I'm going for hands.
Well, we do things with our hands.
Yeah.
And there's
Very
communicative power
expressive.
to it. You know, you definitely move your hands when you talk to people, to gesturing.
Right.
Universal gestures, too. There's a great study on how there's
that.
universal things that people do with their hands across any language in the world.
That people know.
Everybody knows.
Yeah.
And they start doing when they're babies. It's amazing.
I think my next iteration is I'm going to learn sign language, because I love that. Yeah.
That would be appropriate.
Yes.
So now that we know where it came from, I guess my next question is, how is hand analysis scientific?
Yeah, good question. I'll say about the ancient palmistry traditions, the non-predictive, there are many different traditions. So I'll have people come to me and say, yeah, but what about this and what about that? And I say, well, that's not really what we look at in our system. So how that part is scientific is that we have been trained consistently to use the system and apply it over and over and over in a consistent, duplicatable way.
Yes.
Now, the fingerprints are another story, because Richard came up, this is Richard Unger, came up with a theory after all his research about what the fingerprints might mean and which fingerprint happens to show up on which finger. And he started to apply that information. And 50,000 pairs of hands later, and now hundreds of thousands of pairs of fingerprints, later, we've applied and tested his theory, and in a consistent way, because we've been trained in best practices in terms of how to use this information. So it is applied research, basically.
Okay. So you are using the scientific method,
right,
and a pool of cumulative research in order to draw your conclusions.
Exactly. It's not, you know, we're not growing fingerprints in a petri dish. We're going out there and testing our theories.
And it's interesting too, because it sounds like there's some reciprocal information that you're passing off with the client. So,
Right.
you know, you come up with the analysis and you're going to find out probably pretty quickly whether or not there's some truth to the analysis or not.
Right.
You know,
body language says all, right?
Yes, exactly.
So
A very braced hand gesture, right? Yes, no, so that's interesting. So, and you were saying, you were saying 200,000?
Oh, there's been hundreds of thousands since,
Wow.
because he opened our institute in the early 1980s, and so those of us who have been trained, I'm also a master hand analyst, and although there are many who have been trained, there are only really 10 full-time practicing hand analysts. The rest are, we have a lot of layers of our training, so that's sort of the top layer.
Which again is scientific.
Yeah.
It's not just something, you know, something people actually have to train
There's an
for
established
years.
curriculum that we follow, and then best practice in terms of how to apply.
Now, are you certified? Is there like a certification process?
Right.
Okay, so that again
Yeah.
makes it much more scientific than somebody just saying, "Oh, I took that course, and now I'm certified."
Right.
No. That makes a lot more sense. So going to that, what kind of training did you receive to become a master hand analysis?
Well, let's see, I started with the level 1 intensive class, which is what I teach now, as well as the next level up. And that qualifies you, once you've completed that class, qualifies you then to go into the certification series.
And how long does that take?
That's only a 21-hour class, the intensive,
Oh, yeah.
And then you go into the CHA, which is a certified hand analyst, which is a 10-month, pretty intensive, you know, direct or online. We do distance-based as well. And we teach people through videos and through audios and through exercises, private tutoring and group tutoring, and that lasts a full 10 months. Then you can go on, after that certification in your exam, to the advanced hand analyst, and that gets into things. And you have to always be out. You have a certain number of hands you have to read and report back.
So there is actual field work. You're practicing the craft.
Constantly.
It's like being, you know, it's like
there's
being
an
a resident.
expectation for reading a certain number of hands during your training. So.
Oh, wow.
And then, you know.
So you're going around to your friends like, I have to read your hands right now. I've always wondered about you.
Well, you know, in the days when they had video stores, that was my great source with all the kids that used to work in video stores.
Really?
They'd say, "Oh, let me open your hands, open your hands, open your hands." You know, that was the way I got a lot of
Really? Video stores?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
They
I'm
don't,
sorry about
right.
that. That's no longer valid. You should go to coffee houses or something to figure it out.
So then there's another level of master hand analyst. So, you know, there are 3 levels of certification training, and then there's teacher training too. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So I just want to remind our viewers, if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask Janet, any comments, any thoughts, anybody who's actually maybe had their hands read, if you want to call us, the number here is 862-3966. So please give us a call if you want to. Janet, getting back just quickly to the training, I'm just wondering how many. So you've done this for 17 years now, and is that all just as a master hand analyst? Is that as a master?
Well, it took when I started out, when I really started reading hands, I was just at the lower level, and then through supervision and through the subsequent courses, so it probably took me 3 years to get through to that level, but I was still in business.
Yeah, it's like getting your doctorate.
Yeah, and people at the certification level can give very powerful transformational readings. Yeah,
that's very interesting.
Yeah.
So, and don't take this the wrong way, but so we just talked about the scientific basis. I'm sure people are wondering, does this make you a psychic?
Right. Interesting.
Does it make you a psychic, or is it truly scientific, your analysis?
Well, for all you psychics out there, number one, I do believe that there are wonderful psychics that can tell, you know, about what might have happened, what might happen in the future, and so I'm not taking, I don't do that, and I can't do that. But what I do, what I realize, I'm a data wonk. I'm a scientist type, right? When I hand information, I could spend hours giving you every data point in your hand, but you would fall asleep, you'd be disoriented, you'd say, what's the point? So I realized that my particular brand of intuition, which I was really not feeling comfortable about when I first started doing this, because I didn't know any astrologers or hand analysts or psychics or, you know, aura readers or anything like that. But I really realize, and that's why my business name is Hand Tales, is in the story of your hands, that I really can look at the main theme in a person's hands and help them weave their authentic story, to tell their truth and to write their next chapter. So I find that I am able to come up with stories, references, allegory, whatever it might be, to help people really understand, the potential that's in their hands.
So there's sort of a mirror of their journey.
Right.
Their personal journey of their life.
Right.
That whatever you do, the Dorian Gray quotient is located within your hands.
Yeah, exactly. And there are a lot of things in the hands that say, ooh, these are some challenges that you've had. These are some bumps in the road. But if we can get down to the source of what your true story is, which is what I have developed in terms of the intuitive aspect, so I'm not a psychic, but I use a lot of intuition, is that they begin to own their true story. And I tell people, I don't say anything about the future. I just help you plant yourself firmly in the present, warts and all.
Yeah, well,
right?
Well, because that's the real truth.
So you can be ready for anything in the future. But how many kids am I going to have? When am I going to die?
I haven't gotten to that question yet, and which leads me to my next question. How are hand analysts different from palmists, astrologers, life coaches, and therapists?
Okay, so I'll start with life coaches because I am a life coach. I mean, I work with people over time because hands are diagnostic. They can give you a great starting point, very specific, concrete tool. But then what do they do with it? I'm not going to give them answers, but I can coach them. So I do work with people over time. So life coaching also doesn't, some coaches do because we've trained a lot of life coaches, but some coaches don't start with a very specific tool. It's more like, fill in this and how you feel about this. So
here's this test.
Yeah.
I need you to do 120 questions.
Right, and it's how you're feeling at the time rather than being very specific. So that's one slight difference. Palmists, as I said before, tend to use hands in terms of personality typing, and we do that. I mean, you're a walking Myers-Briggs, for those of you who know Myers-Briggs. Everything but your fingerprints tell you something about your personality, or they use your palms for a psychic springboard. And so we do include the information in the palmistry from a personality psychology basis, but the fingerprints are really the signature of our system because that's what we call your soul psychology. Or a guy came to me years ago and called it, this is like your barcode. You come out of the womb and you run yourself across the scanner and that's your highest potential, your blueprint.
It's very similar. I heard something similar when I was talking to somebody today about this interview. And they said, well, your fingerprints are almost like your DNA imprint of your codification of who you are. It's as singular as your DNA code structure.
Exactly. And yet within a family you can get very, very different fingerprint patterns. So go figure. So we don't know. I mean, there's so many still question marks about fingerprints, but the research that we've done, we think of it as transpersonal. It goes beyond, and whether it's DNA imprint, whether it's a soul imprint, whether it's some sort of a marking blueprint for you uniquely, we still say, how is this possible? But we keep using it and applying it.
So it's an evolving science too. So you guys are still you guys are still developing the research, and it's still evolving and becoming more complete.
That sounds accurate. Yep.
Yeah.
So what was the other? Therapist. No, we are not therapists. I mean, we're trained in best practices. We're trained in counseling. We're trained in psychological challenges, but I have on numerous occasions, said, I don't think I'm right for you. I think you need therapy. Now that said, I've had more people say to me, my God, I wasted 6 years in therapy. In one session with you, clarified so many things for me. I wish I hadn't waited, but that does happen. But no, we're not therapists. So therapists operate on, more personal history, behavior, cognitive, past traumas, and that comes into the picture. But this is quite different actually than therapy.
Well, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
So I guess that goes into my big question: what do our hands reveal about us? And Janet was nice enough to say that she would actually take a quick look at my hands and give us an example of what this is all about. She has never looked at my hands before, so this is my first time.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious to hear.
I never looked at her hands either, so.
So do I, should I take off rings and stuff like that?
No,
Okay.
that's fine.
Okay. So what do you want
and just to say, because I won't be looking at your fingerprints, just for the audience, that your fingerprints, as I said, transpersonal, give you a sense of your major at Earth University or life school.
Okay.
They also gives you your highest calling from a soul perspective, your life purpose.
Oh, wow.
And also what Jung would say, the shadow. Your life lesson is in your fingerprints, and it gives you a sense of what might be blocking you in patterns of your life. So your fingerprints give you your life school, your life purpose, and your life lesson.
Yeah, the things that are
But I
intrinsically
want to look
blocked.
at the person's personality to see, all right, well, that's the vehicle to embody that. So
just by looking at the hands, you can tell a lot about somebody's personality.
Yeah. Okay, so you got to roll your hands,
Oh,
both
goodness.
hands,
All right,
both
yes,
hands,
okay.
both hands.
I'm following my instructions. Yes, of course. Here. Okay. I'm gonna keep it out so they can get this on the
Okay,
camera.
so two things are going to, I mean, you have a lot of fire element in your hands. Number one, I'm going to be really revealing the truth, since you are a truth seeker.
And I'm doing this publicly, by the way. No,
yeah, I know.
Which is fine.
You need a lot more fun in your life. I know you're a fun person. I can tell it.
Okay.
See, this is very blue.
Yeah.
This section of your hands is very blue, and it's just saying more love, more closeness, more fun, more, like being a kid and dancing and running around in the trees and whatever. So we're gonna. That's full disclosure.
Okay. All right.
Number one.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to combine your headline, which is this line that goes across your hands, both of them very long, along with this line that goes up your hands right here.
Okay.
So you have a gift. There's 17 different gift markings that show up in a person's hands. And if it shows up, it means there might sometimes be reluctance to use it. Therefore, it's there for you to really look at when it's on the downside or when it's on the upside. But you are a very highly processing, complex thinking, great observing, we call it the octopus brain. So imagine an octopus that has 8 legs, coming from many different places, curious, grabbing information, knowledge, oh my God, understanding, learning, anything that stimulates the brain. But if the octopus doesn't have a mouth, it's just, legs are going all over the place.
That's probably why I do what I do.
Right. So the octopus, yes, right, because you've got a lot of fire element in your hands, which means you want to be busy, you want to have lots of things that interest you. But to focus this brain power, it is a legacy-leaving brain. It's complex thinking. It needs to be challenged and stretched every single day. Learning new things, but not just for the sake of learning, but to bring it into some sort of focus. So these lines that go up to your pinky finger, or we call it the Mercury finger, are called the truth seeker lines. So you add those two together, and that's wanting to uncover the truth, wanting to get at the bottom. So it would be like all the way from a relational truth and understanding about relationships to an embedded journalist in Israel and Palestine to it's just uncovering, wanting to get to the bottom of the truth. So using your keen, analytical, rational, observing brain power to get to the truth.
That's very interesting.
So that's, I could go on and on and on, but those are the things that popped out in my head.
That's very interesting. Full disclosure, that is actually very accurate.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
That's actually shockingly accurate. I'll have to play this for my husband. He will find that very entertaining, I'm sure. He's been telling me all that stuff for 20 years.
And by the way, these hands with that headline could get bored very easily if they're not really stimulating their intellect.
I do a lot of things. So
I know you do. So you got that handled.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. Now, I kind of quickly wanted to talk. I know that you, part of the reason why you ended up on the show is that Melinda invited you here because you had worked with her on the Vermont Commission on Women.
No, it wasn't Vermont Commission.
It wasn't. It was Vermont Women Leaders on a...
that was my name. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So you did she did some research with some Vermont women leaders. And so can you tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about that project?
That was really, and remember, I'm a scientist by nature, so I just have a zest for information and knowledge. So I decided, now what research do I want to do next? And I said, there are some powerful women leaders in Vermont. I mean, they're just, CEOs of companies. And I said, well, I'm going to just invite them. I designed a research project, and I'm going to invite them to participate. All 12 of them said yes, which I was thrilled about. So I imprinted their hands, got their fingerprint pattern, asked them a series of questions, also about their leisure time as well as their work and the nature of their work. And Melinda Moulton was one of the people I had invited to come to participate. And it was just fascinating because the common themes that came out were amazing.
Were there certain themes that were intrinsic through the 12 participants?
Yeah. Well, to begin with, 90% of the participants had what we call high set index fingers, where they sit right up, which we sometimes call lonely at the top. So if you're a woman that's breaking into a man's world, as a CEO, it can feel very lonely, but absolutely requiring respect, commanding respect, and driving for respect. So sometimes that can be a challenge. The other thing that I found is that the hand shape, 75% of the participants had fire and air, which is bright ideas. We call it the illuminator hand, and illuminating bright ideas for people and loving the idea of using the mind, but also using it very creatively. So that was a huge percentage. Equal percentage had the inspirational communicator, which we also call the medical stigmata gift marking in their hand, which is about being a change agent and being an inspirational communicator. So put that with the illuminator, and
that makes a lot of sense.
It's very powerful.
That
so
there
were a number of other things that we found that were common, that were well over,
which again,
60-70%
clinically and on some level, because you're cross-selecting a particular type of person, proves sort of the intrinsic traits that are indicative of each person.
That's right. And I compared them to my database of my people to compare, well, how often does this show up with mine? And then I added Richard's database, and I added Rennell, who was another colleague's database, just so I had enough to compare. And, this commonality among these 12 women were just pretty astounding.
Well,
that's really cool.
that's really and I have to say, from my particular point of view, thank you all so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed listening about my hands, and thank you for watching On the Waterfront.